This is just so cool. Autopilot handling low-speed, nighttime city driving outside of the highway in Europe. There are a ton of pedestrians to our right, and you can see the car visualizing all of them perfectly. This next part really shows how extreme we are. At this point, it's so pitch black outside that Autopilot actually refuses to turn on. And this is one of those moments with cars and pedestrians all around us, really slow speeds and smooth driving where Autopilot almost looks as capable as full self-driving. If only this would last more than 10 seconds. Let's turn on Autopilot even though we're not supposed to. As long as you can see the two blue lines next to the car on the screen, the car is doing 100% of the driving. Let's see how far it will take us. Alright, let's do this. Tonight we're putting Tesla's Autopilot through a serious challenge, driving on dark, almost invisible roads in the Czech Republic. We're starting out nice and easy on some quiet country lanes, then moving on to more crowded city streets, all under a pitch black sky. No fancy equipment. This is just the standard Autopilot. Full self-driving isn't available in Europe yet, but Tesla says it might be here by early 2025, if regulators give the green light. You know what, I'll believe it when I see it, but it definitely sounds intriguing. Right now we're near Kolín, rolling on regular roads instead of highways. Yeah, Tesla recommends Autopilot mainly for highways, but here we are, trying it out on these smaller roads. The coolest part? It's sticking to the speed limits and staying centered in the lane like a pro. That's something you gotta appreciate. Even though the intelligence behind Autopilot's getting really old right now, its performance is still pretty solid, even when it's not in its comfort zone, its designed domain of operation, as the nerds say. As the night wears on, visibility gets worse in this video, but Autopilot keeps going. The reason is, it's got a clear view of the road lines, and as long as it can see lane markings, it's pretty confident. But there's more at play here than just lines on the road. Autopilot isn't using radar or fancy laser scanners like LiDAR. Nowadays, it's all about those 8 cameras mounted all around the car. Think of them like a bunch of smartphone cameras in your pocket, strapped onto the car and always watching every angle. The system takes those camera feeds and uses a powerful onboard computer to piece together a 3D image of the world around the car. Buildings, other cars, street signs, pedestrians, you name it. The neural networks inside the Tesla work in a similar way as our human brain. They are trained to handle all kinds of situations. They know what a car looks like, what a person looks like, and even what's likely to happen next, based on patterns learned from millions of miles driven by other Teslas. Unlike some competitors that rely on expensive sensors and pre-made maps, Cruise and Waymo, Tesla's camera-based approach is designed to scale fast and keep costs down. That means more cars can get these features, not just a few fancy prototypes that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the US, where full self-driving is further along, you can pretty much let the car do everything today: steer, accelerate, brake, park, and even handle intersections. It's kind of mind-blowing. Just search for full self-driving V13. It's insane. Over here in Europe, we're still waiting for that, and the rules are much stricter. Still, Autopilot is already showing off what it can do with just cameras and smart software, even in tough conditions like this dark night. These cameras are tuned to work well in low light, picking out details that our human eyes might miss. Some of Tesla's hardware even has infrared capabilities, letting it see a bit more than what's visible to us. The neural network in the car's computer uses that info to guess what's around the corner, acting like a seasoned driver who just knows the road. Compare that to some other companies who rely on high-definition maps and LiDAR. Those methods can be accurate, but they're also super expensive, and they don't adapt as quickly to new or changing areas. They are not truly intelligent, like Tesla is. So here we are, pushing deeper into the darkness, and it's not just about bragging rights. Watching Autopilot handle these conditions hints at what's coming, a world where self-driving isn't a sci-fi dream, but an everyday thing. Tonight, on these dark Czech roads, we're getting a sneak peek at the future. Let's see how far we can take it. So far, the drive has been nearly perfect, but there is an intersection coming up and there's going to be a car incoming to our right, which you can see right now, which spooks Autopilot a little bit. You can see it highlights the car in red on the screen and slows down pretty significantly before it proceeds normally. But let's face it, this little hiccup was far from optimal driving. You might say Autopilot slammed on the brakes for a car that was clearly stopped and giving us the right of way. This kind of sudden, unexpected braking is what we call phantom braking. It's when the car's system gets spooked by something it perceives as a threat, even though a human driver wouldn't have blinked twice. Maybe it's a car waiting to turn, a shadow on the road, or a billboard that just looks odd at night. The Autopilot sees it, thinks danger, and taps the brakes harder than it needs to. This is pretty much a solved problem with full self-driving, but why does this happen here? The system's camera-based vision is good, but it's not perfect. It's sort of like a nervous new driver who's super cautious, sometimes too cautious. It's also one of the more frustrating parts of using Autopilot right now, because smoothness is key to a comfortable self-driving experience. In any way, still better safe than sorry. Phantom braking is a far less serious problem than actually not braking when you need to brake, right? Here we decided to step in and turn off Autopilot because it wasn't using the high beams the way we expected. In our eyes, in your eyes probably, the road is too dark and we thought the brights were necessary. But, you know, maybe Autopilot saw just fine without them. Thanks to its camera setup and powerful processing, it can sometimes detect enough detail in low light that it doesn't need that extra boost. Disengaging Autopilot is easy, by the way. You can simply nudge the steering wheel, tap the brake, or hit the stalk to take back control. It's a quick, everyday reminder that the driver always stays in charge and is responsible, even as these systems get smarter. We're just a handful of subscribers away from our first 1,000. If you want to be among the first to see full self-driving in Europe, this is your last chance to join the club before we cross that big 1,000 mark. So subscribe now, and serious thanks to all existing subscribers. Meanwhile, some human drivers out there don't seem to care about anything. Look at that guy blasting past us at 40 over the limit, ignoring solid lines like they're optional. Who needs AI when you've got that kind of talent, right? Anyway, back to Autopilot. As we roll up to this next intersection, a roundabout, watch how cautious it gets. The car slows down, hesitant to go in. Truth is, Autopilot is basically just advanced lane keeping at this point. Roundabouts and other complex intersections are still too tricky for it. That's where full self-driving would come in, handling these situations so you wouldn't have to. But for now, with Autopilot alone, we've still got to take charge at the last second. When you're using Autopilot or FSD, it's super important to remember that at the end of the day, you are the driver. Autopilot can give out at any moment. Maybe it freaks out and slams on the brakes or misreads the situation and veers off course. It's not guaranteed to protect you from accidents, and there's no magic force field around your car when you engage it. That's why Tesla tells you to keep your hands on the wheel and be ready to take over in a split second. For example, here, Autopilot would have driven us into the middle of the roundabout and crashed had we not intervened. You're still responsible for what this car does, no matter how advanced the tech seems. What we're doing here, pushing this basic Autopilot system into situations it's not really designed for, definitely isn't recommended. We're purposely exploring its edge cases, driving it at night in challenging conditions, just to see where it stands right now. You might wonder, why bother with this stupid testing? Why risk it? Because this gives us a baseline to measure from once full self-driving finally arrives. It's like testing a student before the final exam. If we know its weaknesses now, we'll better appreciate how far it's come when it can finally handle these roads on its own, without any interventions. As we head further into the city, watch how chill and steady Autopilot is, even with cars rushing past in the opposite lane just a few feet away. No phantom braking this time, and that's no small feat, especially with headlights glaring straight into our cameras. It's also pretty cool to see Autopilot tackle these pronounced curves in the road without flinching. Of course, there's an additional reason it seems more relaxed here. We've got a car ahead of us. Having that lead vehicle gives Autopilot a reference point, making it easier to judge speed, pacing, spacing, and the flow of traffic. It's like having a guide pulling you through a tricky situation. This is just so cool. Autopilot handling low-speed, nighttime city driving outside of the highway in Europe. Like it's no big deal. If this impresses you, tap the like button. If you think it's overrated, hit dislike and let me know why in the comments. Seriously, I'm open to hearing all opinions. You might notice on the display that it seems to show objects detected by ultrasonic sensors. Older Teslas like this had these, sure, but Autopilot doesn't actually use them anymore. It doesn't depend on radar either, and the newest Teslas don't even have radar hardware. Some critics say Tesla's cutting corners by not using radar, ultrasonics, or LiDAR. Just throw all the sensors in and call it a day, right? But it turns out adding more sensors didn't boost performance, it actually made things worse. When radar and cameras disagreed on what was in front of the car, the cameras usually had the right answer, and radar was wrong. The extra data from it just caused confusion, and that's why Tesla ditched those sensors and went all in on cameras and neural networks. This camera-only approach, known today as Tesla Vision, led straight to the development of FSD 12 and later 13, which is the most capable autonomous systems on the roads today. As we roll over the train tracks, Autopilot just cruises right on through, no drama, still locked onto that lead car. Absolutely no problem with the car on our right, probably because there's plenty of distance. And now we can appreciate those 3D visuals again. Moving further into the city center. Check how clearly it shows pedestrians on the display. It's extra cautious around them, which is a good thing, but can also lead back to that phantom braking issue we talked about. And now, here's a perfect example of that. Suddenly, the car picks the wrong lead vehicle. Instead of continuing behind the car it's been following, it swings over to tail some driver waiting to turn left. It slows down, no turn signal, totally confusing everyone and backing up traffic behind us. This wasn't a life or death moment, but we took over to keep things moving smoothly and avoid making everyone behind us super annoyed. The car continues to drive really well according to the speed limit inside the city and even past this giant truck mere feet away from us. Even though right after passing it does a little bit of that phantom braking. This is just an amazing performance for Autopilot. Not easy driving for this antiquated system that's not taking full advantage of the newest software. Here you can see it visualize the cones in the middle of the road basically that someone put there, and now it's slowing down, driving through this intersection again. One of the coolest things here is how Autopilot doesn't just see the lanes, but also picks out details like turn arrows painted on the asphalt and the traffic lights overhead. Sadly, it can't actually respond to those lights yet. We've been lucky so far that our route has stayed straightforward. This next stretch might be the highlight of this drive. When our lead car turns right, Autopilot doesn't flinch. It just keeps going straight through the intersection, even though it's now all on its own in total darkness. No confusion, no sudden braking, just smooth progress deeper into the city. If you're loving this content and already hit like and subscribe, guess what? You can now take it a step further. Become a channel member, leave a special thanks comment, or even grab a big discount on a Tesla using the link below. Seriously, every bit of support helps me keep bringing you these awesome Autopilot adventures. Thanks for riding along. As we cross over a bridge, Autopilot stays in the correct right lane, perfectly lining up with the navigation directions you can see on the screen. But here's the catch. We set our route wrong, so we need to take over. Even if we had the right directions punched in, Autopilot still can't actually make navigational turns on its own. That's a job for Enhanced Autopilot, which we covered in our last video. If you're curious about how Enhanced Autopilot handles turn-by-turn maneuvers, stick around until the end of this video and I'll point you in the right direction. This next part really shows how extreme we are. At this point, it's so pitch black outside that Autopilot actually refuses to turn on. That's right. When I said you can switch it on almost anywhere, well, here's one of the exceptions. Usually it just depends on how clear the lane lines are, but I think the main problem here is visibility. Tesla shows you on the screen when autopilot is available, a small gray steering wheel above your current speed. When we finally get autopilot working again, we're nearing the big finale. There are a ton of pedestrians to our right, and you can see the car visualizing all of them perfectly. We get slightly blocked by a car turning right, but to be fair, autopilot never fully stops, just creeps forward really slowly. And this is one of those moments with cars and pedestrians all around us, really slow speeds and smooth driving, where autopilot almost looks as capable as full self-driving. If only this would last more than 10 seconds. When it looked like the car might not stop properly for that bust, the driver freaked out and disengaged. In my opinion, it wasn't truly critical, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. One thing's certain, autopilot was moving a bit too quickly, even accelerating, which definitely wasn't ideal. When we re-engage briefly, autopilot seems like it's going to follow the bus for a second, then suddenly rushes forward. Luckily, the people managing the building ahead placed some cones after we nearly rammed them last time. The car notices those cones as it does this pedestrian right in front of us, and screaming at us to take over, it safely comes to a full stop. Truly intelligent all the way through this illegal maneuver. What a ride, ladies and gentlemen, and what a better way to end it than parking in as cozy a spot as these innocent train tracks. This truly is the final destination. But before you go, check out one of our best and most exciting videos where we actually tricked autopilot to drive through a roundabout successfully several times. You can click on that video right now in the middle of your screen.